Hello. I am going to be reading through the objection to state's motion for the protective order and then inserting some clips from a reading that I believe pertain to this particular order. Please remember, everything that is implied or said on my behalf is alleged and my opinion. And then, of course, the document that I'm reading from is a court document, and I will link it in the description. It says, comes now Brian C. Kohberger by and through his attorney, J. Weston Logston, Chief Deputy Litigation, and hereby objects to the state's motion for protective order filed June 16, 2023, on the grounds that the material the state seeks to hide is discoverable and must be provided to Mr. Kohberger. Factual background. On November 13, 2022, law enforcement, responding to a 911 call, found Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan deceased. Law enforcement later found a K-bar knife sheath placed next to Miss Mogan in her bed. The sheath was placed buttoned side down and partially under Miss Mogan and the comforter. On November 20th, 2022, the Idaho State Police Lab in Idaho located DNA on the button of the sheath and performed STR analysis that led nowhere when ran through CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, other than to show the provider was a male. By December 17, 2022, lab analysis were aware of 2 additional males' DNA within the house where the deceased were located, and another unknown male DNA on a glove found outside the residence on November 20th, 2022. To this date, the defense is unaware of what sort of testing, if any, was conducted on these samples other than the STR DNA profiles. Further, these 3 separate distinct DNA male profiles were not identified through CODIS, leading to the conclusion that the profiles do not belong to Mr. Kohberger. While this was ongoing, police were investigating many various possible suspects. Many of them provided DNA. At least one had his DNA serendipitously taken from discarded cigarette. Many also had their phones taken and downloaded. One area of the investigation had to do with a white sedan seen on camera located at 1112 King Road, first glimpsed by officers on November 18, 2022. By November 25, 2022, police believed the car to be a white Elantra and asked law enforcement to be on the lookout for one. Precisely how the police came to believe the car was an Elantra is still unknown. A report from an analysis for the FBI dated March 21, 2023, shows the analysis heavily relying on a video of a car heading in the wrong direction and at the wrong time on Ridge Road. The state's latest filing admits that somewhere within all of this, they engaged in quote-unquote investigative genetic genealogy using the DNA taken from the button on the sheath, and now claims it was due to the use of this technique that tipped law enforcement to investigate Mr. Kohberger. It remains unclear what the police first relied on in focusing their investigation on Mr. Kohberger. No matter what came first, the car or the genetic genealogy, the investigation has provided precious little. There is no connection between Mr. Kohberger and the victims. There is no explanation for the total lack of DNA evidence from the victims in Mr. Kohberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle. In essence, through the lack of disclosure and their motion to protect the genetic genealogy investigation, the state is hiding its entire case. Argument. The state apparently thinks that they need not explain how they came to think it was Mr. Kohberger's DNA on the sheath. Presumably, the defense is expected to accept at face value that the sheath had touch DNA just waiting for testing by all the FBI's myriad sources. Additionally, the defense is to guess whether the state focused its investigation on Mr. Kohberger via a bizarrely complex DNA tree experiment or through its faulty identification of the vehicle involved in this case. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Mr. Kohberger does not accept that his defense does not need this information. It rather obviously falls within the ambit of Rule 16b4 and 5, a fact the state's briefing makes clear in its kitchen sink approach to their briefing. The state begins their argument claiming Rule 16 has no interest in IgG testing, and then ends their argument claiming that somehow people will stop sharing their genetics if they were to realize the government is watching. Both arguments must fail. To begin with, the state apparently only wants to prevent Mr. Kohlberger from seeing how the IgG profile was created and how many other people the FBI chose to ignore during their investigation. In essence, the state argues if the later STR testing is accurate, then there is no reason to concern ourselves with how the state came to investigate Mr. Kohlberger. State's brief at 9. What the state's argument asks this court and Mr. Kohlberger to assume is that the DNA on the sheath was placed there by Mr. Kohlberger and not someone else during an investigation that spans hundreds of members of law enforcement and apparently at least one lab the state refuses to name. Perhaps most puzzling is the state's argument. While Rule 16b5 requires them to turn over the results or reports from scientific investigations, it does not require the state to disclose what law enforcement does with the results or reports. State's brief at 14. First of all, that sounds like an admission that the information as to how the IgG was carried out should be disclosed. Second, what law enforcement does with the results or reports is covered by Rule 16b6, statements of prosecution witnesses, and 8, police reports. Frankly, the fact that members of the FBI are so concerned about permitting Mr. Kohlberger to know what they were up to with what was supposedly his DNA does not give one the impression that there is nothing to see here, as the states seem to imply. Finally, the states claim that ICR 16G2 applies to this matter is quite bizarre. Presumably, the independent company the government relied on was paid for its work and would stand by it in a court. The state provides no real argument as to why the company needs to be protected. Mr. Kohlberger is left to suspect they wish to keep their methods from being questioned. To the extent that there is some concern about intellectual property that can be addressed via a protective order that permits Mr. Kohlberger and his defense team to review their work. Second, the state appears to argue that everyone living on Earth that provides genetic information is A, unaware that their DNA could be used by a government somewhere for something, and B, is a quote-unquote informant within the meaning of the term in the rule. The state citations to cases involving actual informants hardly help it to make this incredible leap. No court has ever found the existence of a DNA informant. It would appear that the state is acknowledging that companies are providing personal information to the state, and those companies and the government would suffer if the public were to realize it. The only two databases that allow access are ones that already inform their users, and those users can opt in to allow law enforcement searches. The statement by the government implies that the databases searched may be ones that law enforcement is specifically barred from, which explains why they do not want to disclose their methods. If the fact that a government is looking at the genetic information that people are sharing was an issue, then the state's very public acknowledgement of such investigations was clearly a big mistake. In any case, it is hard to understand why Mr. Kohlberger should be the one to suffer because these companies and our government choose to either mislead or not educate the public. According to the Pew Research Center in February 2020, 48% of respondents thought it was acceptable to give their data to law enforcement to solve crime. 33% said no, and 18% were unsure. However, 60% thought their genetic information could not be shared with other companies. There is no federal law about the sharing of genetic information, but multiple states have begun regulating police use. Lindsay Van Ness DNA databases are boon to police but menace to privacy, critics say. Mr. Kohlberger has reasons to be extremely suspicious of the IgG used in this case. Rather than seeing it as some sort of complex tree building that led to him, it appears far more like a lineup where the government was already aware of who they wanted to target. rather than have the investigation done by someone blind to the fact the FBI chose to do it themselves. This is akin to the police pulling in Mr. Kohlberger and 5 of his cousins off the street and then pointing at him. The only authority the state has in its favor that is on point is a trial court order from a Californian case that settled before it could lead anywhere. That decision relied on its People versus Johnson. The court in Johnson was not deciding whether a defendant had the right to know how he was identified, only that his identification could come in a trial without a mini trial about it. A better case on the issue is State versus R. Tigretta. In this case, an appellate court heard similar arguments about the need for software used for facial recognition to be discovered to the defendant, though they would not be admitted at trial. The court, considering the matter, found, "We are keenly aware the cases we have discussed involved instances concerning fire hearings and potential expert testimony, and that here we are dealing instead with eyewitnesses who have already identified the perpetrator and the identification found admissible under Wade. However, the facts of this case convince us defendant will be deprived of due process if, quote, he does not have access to the raw materials integral to the building of an effective defense," end quote. In Ake versus Oklahoma, the evidence sought here is directly tied to the defense's ability to test the reliability of the FRT. As such, it is vital to impeach the witness's identification, challenge the state's investigation, create reasonable doubt, and demonstrate third-party guilt. The FRT's reliability has obvious implications for the accuracy of the identification process because an array constructed around a mistaken potential match would leave the witness with no actual perpetrator to choose. The reliability of technology bears direct relevance to the quality and thoroughness of the broader criminal investigation and whether the potential matches the software return yielded any other variable alternative suspects to establish third-party guilt. Defendant's request for the identity, design, specifications, and operation of the program or programs used for analysis and the database or databases used for comparison are relevant to FRT's reliability. At trial, the state will likely have the investigating officer explain the police investigation, including the process of retrieving the still photo from surveillance cameras ultimately used to generate an image of the defendant. Although we do not speculate regarding the exact nature of this testimony and whether defendant will seek to impeach it, the fact the state does not bear the burden of adducing testimony regarding the composition of the photo array does not bar the defense access to the discovery sought. Mr. Kohlberger finds himself in a similar position as Mr. Art Tigretta. A massive investigation came to focus on him and him alone. The state appears to be trying to hide its original domino such that he cannot discover why. Mr. Kohlberger has a right to discover and question the investigation that led to him. This court should so find. Dated this 22nd day of June 2023, Ann Taylor, Public Defender. And J. Weston Logston, Chief Deputy Litigation Assigned Attorney.
So let's word this like this. There's something that at the very least the prosecution would rather the defense not have, okay? That's at this point kind of obvious, right? So 2 rows of 5, what can we know about that? We're going to do the same thing as yesterday. From conception of, I don't want them to know about this for this reason, to now what we're doing about it. Not fact, my opinion. Right away, what that's saying to me is that, so I worded the question to be more broad, like, at the very least, I said, this is like, allegedly, my opinion, this looks like there is something that is being intentionally hidden. And it almost looks like I guess from the prosecution standpoint, almost like, I know that it's insulting your intelligence by having to continue to play this cat and mouse game, but I have no other option. Let's see, that's what I'm getting so far. The Hierophant reverse. It's almost like there's a piece of evidence, right? Or a piece of something, like, the prosecution is like, I know I'm gonna, I don't know, because then they have to turn it in. This would be like if you are basing being able to use some kind of data or evidence or something based off of a loophole. I'm not going to give this now. I know I should, but I'm going to use this exact argument later as to why I have to bring it in. It's almost like I'm waiting for this to be said in court to be like, oh, okay, I actually have to use this. But I don't want to put it in yet, even though I know that this is going to come up and I know I'm going to want to use this. But I'm going to try and give some kind of argument as to why I didn't give it earlier, and I think that is why the defense is like, no, give it again. Okay, no, we're going to try this again. Are you sure there's nothing else? Okay, are you sure there's nothing else? It's almost like the defense knows that the prosecution is doing that. So it's like, I'm going to keep doing this and doing this and doing this. And if we ask you 10 times through paperwork if there's anything else and you say no, and then we get to that moment in court where something is said and you're like, oh, by the way, I want to now put in this. I didn't think I was going to have to use it, or I didn't think it was going to be relevant, but okay, now I want to put it in. Now you can't because we asked you 10 times and you said there was nothing. It's almost like that is what's happening, allegedly, in my opinion. Conflict and disagreements. Yeah, that's I don't know what else to say. That's the picture this is painted for me. And I know that doesn't seem like a typical thing. Like, people who know more about this are probably like, that doesn't make sense. And I agree. I don't think it makes sense. But it's, the Hierophant in reverse is like trying a new way of doing something. To me, it's like, we have no other option. We have to try this. And if we keep it out and don't put it in, and then we try to put it in through some loophole, and it doesn't work, then oh well, but it's worth it to not have it in there yet. Knight of Pentacles reverse. Someone that you should be able to trust that you cannot trust, allegedly, in my opinion. And the Knight of Pentacles in reverse also brings in the element of like, I know this is risky, I'm taking a gamble, I know that if I don't give this in now, or if I don't bring attention to this now, or if I don't give them what they're asking for now, that I might not be able to use that loophole, but I have no other option. That's what it seems like to me. So Five of Pentacles was the card that made me say how I worded it may have been a little bit more direct than that, because I said this would be like if at the least they had something that they didn't want them to see, but the Five of Pentacles made me feel like there is something that's purposely being avoided. And then this was the clarifier. So it tends to make me believe that, let's see what the other clarifiers are. It tends to make me, I'm just gonna say, it tends to make me believe that there's something that shows this was not a lone person through and through. There was some kind of something as in terms of help. Regret in reverse. It's the card that came out for Brent. Page of Swords reversed is like how I said, it's basically, that is the piece of it that's like, okay, we know we're being asked for this, and we know that they want this specifically, and we know that later we want to use some loophole to use this specifically without putting it in right now, and they know that, and we know that they know that, but there's nothing we can do because we already showed our cards. Like, if you're like holding something back, and the other person's really adamant about getting it, but you continue to hold it back even when they kind of call your bluff and say, okay, we're asking you for a third time. We know, I feel like that was the defense saying, we know that you're going to try and use a loophole to put this in late, so we're going to be super, super clear that we tried we gave you every opportunity to give it to us now. You chose not to, you can't use it with a loophole. I feel like that's kind of, at least in part, what the defense is doing and why they're like, okay, let me file this again, one more, a little bit louder now, like, because they're anticipating some kind of loophole or something being used to put that through later. And if they didn't ask for it 10 times, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It would be like, oh, well, maybe it was an oversight, or I don't know how that would work. But the fact that they asked for it 10 times and still didn't get it, it's going to be a no, we can't use that. So... And I know that typically you have to put in everything beforehand. I know that it would probably cause a big stink and stir if something was added, but I feel like there's some kind of loophole that they were going to use to do that. But the defense is like, nah, you're not going to do that because I'm taking that opportunity away from you by asking for this so many times that you can't miss the fact that I'm asking for it. The Hierophant reverse. Deep State in reverse. And Celebrity upright. It's like the battle between what's being seen and televised versus what's going on behind the scenes. Deep State being reversed and Celebrity being upright tends to make me feel like the talk about is the prosecution falling apart may hold at least some weight, because it looks like with this Deep State in reverse, it looks like they're struggling. This is how I word this. They're struggling more behind the scenes than what it looks like on media. And in the media, it looks like they're struggling. So, I guess it's just like to put it in perspective. Mountains in reverse, but these three came out and I want to see what they are. Oh. Cup. Cover up, outside, and witness. And mountains in reverse. Is it possible the prosecution doesn't want the defense to get a script of? It's almost like the defense knows that. I don't know how to put it. Okay, so let's say I'm Brian. If I know I didn't act alone, or I know I help in this or that part of it, but I don't know how to prove that, because I know that they're trying to get just me, so they're going to disregard or push away or try to cover up anything that would point to anything that says it's not just me. So I know that the surviving roommates know that too, because they were in the house, right? It's almost like they want to know how to question the surviving roommates in order to get them to go back on part of their testimony from grand jury. I mean, these three cards, it's like, I know if I question these girls a certain way, I can get the truth, but I have to know what they're going with so I can know how to prepare myself. Like, I don't know. I feel like the like grand jewel of what the defense is specifically seeking has a lot to do, if not everything to do, with the surviving roommates. Water supply gives me the image of like a dam breaking open, and like mix that with Knight of Pentacles in reverse, taking a risk. I'm taking a risk by not giving you this, because if I give you this, it can burst that dam open and everything else can come out. I think it has to do with the surviving roommate's testimony. I really do. But it's almost, it doesn't stop there though. It's almost like the surviving roommate's testimony could open some kind of door that Brian's team could walk through and be like, oh, look at all this other stuff there is to see, but they need someone to open that door first so they can go there. I don't know how that makes sense, but that's what I'm getting. Like legally, I don't know how that makes sense, but I'm getting the image of like, there's a door and one of the surviving roommates sitting on the testimony stand, testifying, and it's almost like the testimony in and of itself gives that person a key because they testified, and then that key can unlock this door, but like only one of them can open the door. But once the door is open, Brian's team can be like, okay, look at all the other stuff in this room that there is to see. But like if they don't open the door, then they can't go there. I don't know how it makes sense, but that's what I'm getting as an analogy. Underneath of the Five of Pentacles, the Fool in reverse, being careless and unprepared. I don't know if that has to do with the loophole, because Five of Pentacles came out with the evil, and this was about them knowing that they're not giving something, or knowing that they're taking a gamble by not giving it now to try and use it in a loophole later. And the Fool in reverse is also like, I know I shouldn't do this, but I already did it. Like the Magician in reverse, manipulation. Also, the Magician in reverse is like upright, it's making things disappear. And then in reverse, it's like making things appear out of nowhere. So it's giving me the image of, because the Page of Swords in reverse is like, we know what you're looking for specifically, and specifically we're manipulating some kind of situation, and this is also not living up to your highest potential. So it's like, is there something we could be doing that we're not? Yeah, but we're not. Allegedly, my opinion. All of this is alleged, my opinion. Knight of Wands. Is it possible like one of the girls said something? This is just an example. Okay, so for example, let's say one of the girls gets up on the stand and says, this happened, that happened, blah, blah, and then I heard a car screech off X amount of time later. That's not like the best example, but something like that. It's like something like that they're trying to capitalize on, because they're trying to be like, okay, well, how is that possible that he did that, and then the car happened that time later? Like, wouldn't there have to be, I don't know, that's not the best example, but it's like they're trying to, there's some piece of testimony that they're looking for specifically because they want to, it's almost like if you see the testimony from one way, but it's like they want to look at it from over here instead of over here, and question from this angle instead of this angle, in order to get them to talk about something else. So it's not like, it's not necessarily a lie, but it's like something that if you look at it very closely, it's off. And if you really dig into that, it's like, okay, in order to explain why that was off, you'd have to open that door. Oh, the door. Oh. It's about freedom, and the cards that came up over top were these: Mountains in reverse and Five of Wands, conflict of ego. Whatever it is that the defense is looking for, it's the example that I gave a long time ago of Brian's driving down the road. He's in this passenger, this was an analogy. So imagine someone's driving, Brian's in the passenger seat, and there's a long brick building. It's like 2 miles long brick building. There's one little glass window somewhere, but he doesn't know where. And he has one rock. And this person is going to speed, pedal to the metal, down this whole, let's say it's a 2 mile stretch of building. If Brian can, without knowing it, know how hard, how far to throw this rock and hit the window, he can climb out. If not, he misses the rock, he doesn't get another rock, he doesn't get another chance, and that's it. That's this. That is, I really feel as though, guilty or not, I can get this whole case to fall apart because of something that was testified about in that grand jury. So I don't necessarily think that, I don't necessarily tend to believe that the defense is worried about how the grand jury was chosen or anything like that. I think they're trying to get access to find that piece that they feel is this, is that rock that Brian can throw. Ace of Pentacles reverse, taking an offer back. That's interesting. Remember how I said that the new lawyer, and I said he plays dirty? He's going to need to for this because, you know how do I put this? How the defense, how the prosecution doesn't, they were saying they don't work for the families and they don't necessarily have to make the families happy and all that. Like, I almost feel like it's some energy similar to that, but directed at the surviving roommates, where like, in order to get Brian's defense's team's plan to work, they're going to have to do something that's going to look kind of heartless towards one of the surviving roommates in order to get the truth, or in order to get, I don't know how to explain it other than it's like a key that once you hand this key to the defense, no matter what you say in contradiction to it, it's going to be like, okay, yeah, but reasonable doubt. Okay, yeah, but undeniable reasonable doubt. Okay, yeah, but you can't ignore this reasonable doubt. Like, it's something like that. Private property. The Fool is the recklessness, the kind of knowingly holding something back. Private property. I feel like that's just a huge confirmation. Private property, no soliciting and no trespassing. Like, this is ours. You can't see it yet until we decide it's time. I know that is not like the legal way to do it, but that's why I think that analogy is important of like doing this, planning to use a loophole, the defense kind of catching on and being like, we're gonna ask for this 35 times so that when you go to use the loophole, it'll be like, really? How? You didn't know you needed that? The 17 papers that I handed you 8 times? The Magician in reverse. Communication. Manipulated communication. So that's like, I know exactly what you're looking for, but I'm not giving it to you. And then we have manipulated communication. So I was planning on using some kind of legal lingo to get a loophole to be able to bring this in later, because I was going to give the argument that I didn't think it was going to be needed, but then when something specific came up, I realized I needed it. I don't know. I know that like would happen a lot more if it was easy to do. So it's some kind of sophisticated, well thought out loophole. It's not just as simple as that, but that's like a watered down version of what I'm seeing. False person in reverse. I really feel like what it points to is the surviving roommates having something that makes it really, 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 really hard to believe that only Brian was involved. And it's like, once you put that out there, then all the other things start to fall apart as well, because that was mainly based on him doing it by himself. 8 of Swords reversed. Hidden key in reverse. 8 of Swords in reverse would be the card about freedom. Hidden key in reverse came out in reverse as well. There is a way. How do I word this so it makes sense? Normally in this situation, in this type of situation where it's quadruple homicide, police have enough to indict by grand jury, all this, like, I feel like usually it would be kind of more cut and dry than it is. Like, oh, if they have a guy who killed 4 people, obviously they have a ton of evidence and it's going to be obvious, you know, in court. If they have enough to get him, they have enough to keep him, I guess. But in this case, it's not really that. So I feel like typically it would not be very practical to say, oh, there's a chance that that guy's going to get out. If it was the case of quadruple homicide, they have enough to find him, chase him across the country, and lock him up, right? But in this case, I feel like there is a possibility that he actually unlocks some kind of way to... I don't know if it's necessarily not guilty. It doesn't feel like not guilty. It feels like something other than not guilty. So I don't know if that means hung jury. I don't know if that means... I don't know. So if it wasn't not guilty, but if he's getting out, that means it's not guilty. Not if he is getting out. If he were to get out, it would mean that it wasn't a guilty, but I'm not saying it being not guilty. So if that was the case, it would either be, I guess, hung jury or the case get thrown out. I don't know. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying I do think there... It's almost like the prosecution knows about that room, the hypothetical room, and is trying to keep him from even getting anywhere close to it by like guarding the entrance. I don't know how else to explain it. And I know that doesn't sound like what is allowed to happen. I don't know. That's what I'm kidding. And then Ace of Pentacles in reverse. Meeting. Ace of Pentacles in reverse would be about taking back an offer. Above that, we have the Knight of Pentacles reverse, which allegedly, in my opinion, in this reading is representing the prosecution not being able to be all the way trusted, allegedly, in my opinion. And that is the water supply. It's like we're trying to protect that dam from bursting open. Meeting an Ace of Pentacles is... if we're not able to use your testimony or what you told us turned out not to be true, we're not able to give you whatever deal you had before. So I don't know if that means that there was some kind of tell us the truth and you won't get in trouble for waiting almost half a day to call the police after these people were murdered. I don't know. There's some big move coming from the defense soon, but it's going to be very private. or something. It looks like when you would maybe. So I'm going to do this different. So I'm going to pull a clarifier for the combination of the Queen of Pentacles reverse with the Emperor. Boat. I was just about to say this would almost be like if you call like a surprise witness, but not a witness to like the crime, like a witness to, I don't know. Ten of Pentacles reverse, Knight of Swords reverse. Secret space program. It would be like somebody that you wouldn't expect to be, I don't know if that's the right word. Not necessarily that you wouldn't expect, but someone that you'd be like, oh wow, that person's going to bat for Brian. Like, I don't, and maybe not by choice, but by subpoena or something. Revenge in reverse, and another one fell out. Love upright. It's almost like there's like some kind of move coming that was going to be made much later in the trial that's being made earlier because of that push and pull with information or evidence. Home in reverse. The fact that they didn't find certain things, such as like victim's blood, I guess, in the car or something like that. There's a bunch of things like that, obviously, but there's one of them that's going to be really significant. I don't know what it is yet, but there's like something that we didn't find, as in the prosecution. The prosecution has something that we didn't find specifically that the defense is going to hammer in, like, why didn't you find this? Why didn't you? It's not the knife, though, because that would be the obvious thing. It's not the knife. I almost feel like it's the lack of DNA in the car, but I almost feel like it's even less obvious than that. It's clothing, maybe? There's gonna be a focus on something. But it like, let's say it was the clothing. It would have to be like, if he was very meticulous about what outfits he had and knew what he had and everything was still there. Like, it would be like that. I don't think it's that, though. What details can we have about anything that is in or talked about, or anything that relates to what the prosecution either wants to, or is trying to, or would rather have the defense not know about? What are some details of that? We're gonna do 5 cards. Assassination, outer space, the 2 people in the car, drugs and poison in reverse. Last card. A second person, drugs, assassination. Outer space gives me the image of like how everything is kind of, it can be very spread out, but it's still in the same sky. And these things are connected. Allegedly, my opinion, no facts. Have a good day. Gilded means covered thinly with gold leaf or gold paint, or wealthy and privileged. Privileged regret? Gold leaf regret in reverse. What this is making me think is how there's like kind of like weird antler things. It's giving me like deer in a headlight type energy, and that's kind of what he looked like yesterday. Like, gilded regret. covered thinly with gold leaf or gold paint. So that would be covering up what's really going on with some fancy layer, but it's in reverse. So that's starting to come. I intend to take off the gold paint so you can see what's really going on underneath. That's what I think that means. What does it mean to be gilded? Covered or highlighted with gold or something of golden color. Having a pleasing or showy appearance that conceals something of little worth. But in reverse. It's part of a plan for something that he has up his sleeve. But it was in reverse. It's making me think when people say it didn't pass the sniff test or it didn't pass the smell test. A test of the truthfulness of one's statement, the caliber or mortality of one's actions. If you sniff or smell something that is bad, it means you have identified a problem. So not passing the smell test means a person is fake or their ideas are bogus. For the first court appearance. Yeah, I really think standing silent was a direct message that the prosecution was meant to pick up on. And the message was something along the lines of, if you don't want to hear what we have to say, then we're coming for I don't know what word to use here. We're coming for we're coming to shine a light on things that you're trying to keep dark. Where does pass the smell test come from? The origin specifically comes from the practice of sniffing milk for freshness, especially in the days before homogenization. Sniffing milk for freshness. So you expect something to be rotten, or you're trying to see if something's rotten. Trying to see, and it's in reverse. That first court appearance, Brian was thinking how he feels like the prosecution is purposely making it difficult for him to smell the evidence, or, you know. It's weird because it's almost like Brian's team is going to try and get everything thrown out because of some potential ethical overreach of the use of forensic genealogy. I don't think it's going to work, but they're going to try something with it. And them trying something with it and it failing is going to increase the ability for it to be used in the future, because you tried to block us from using it. It failed in a very big case. Now we know we can use it going forward. The use of forensic genealogy also underlines that the current storyline about how police identified their suspect, which some are suggesting is a model, is missing pivotal details. According to numerous genetic genealogists, the case embodies an emerging trend of leaving out any mention of forensic genealogy from... Can you tell I didn't read this before? Oh, interesting. Some are suggesting is a model, missing pivotal details.
According to numerous genetic genealogists, the case embodies an emerging trend of leaving out any mention of forensic genealogy from court documents and press conferences. The Idaho affidavit's thoughtful omission of any reference to genealogy, as forensic DNA analyst Tiffany Roy put it, has reignited a heated debate among investigative genealogists, lawyers, detectives, and other forensic experts about the wisdom of this strategy. Huh. The sun shining light on something, seeing if it can be used as absolute truth or not. The Hermit reverse. It's possible Kohberger's team may try to get that particular piece of evidence thrown out, and then hence everything else that came after that would be thrown out, I guess, as well, or whatever, because you only got that based off of the warrant that you got because of evidence that's now being thrown out. That may be the root of their part of their strategy here. It's like they'll go back through other cases and say, oh, well, you used it here, but why wasn't it in the report? Is it because it's not absolute and you can't trust it? Because if that's true and you knew that and used it anyway to get everything else, then you were going on an unethical method of obtaining evidence. Or maybe not unethical is not the right word, because you can be unethical and still be technically legal. Like you're obtaining warrants based off of information that is not absolute or cannot be trusted in like you're using this to get warrants, but you can't use it to put in the affidavit because you know that it's not full trustworthy. You're only using that, so they're gonna try and make it look like you are putting evidence into place to test what you got that was not, how do I put this? Using a method that you know cannot be proven and used in court and used in the affidavit, you based everything else off of that piece of information. So if that piece is not valid, how is anything else that came from that valid? I think that's the route that is going to be attempted to be taken here. The way that they went about this, and the fact that it's not typically how they said used in court documents and press conferences, that's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a really big deal. Sorry, that trash truck just threw me off for a second. I was going to say something important too. Keep the victims from talking about the surrounding factors. Oh, because of how they got the DNA, if people are talking about the surrounding factors, they're talking about drug use and traffic going in and out, not trafficking, but traffic, foot traffic going in and out of the house. And it puts more focus on where that DNA could have come from. This genetic testing is going to play a big role, not only in this case, but in other cases going forward. It's setting a precedent for something. And so he did not stand out because his phone was turned off, so he did not stand out. So again, if it was not for that bit of DNA being on the sheath, like if it was just in the house and there was other traffic in and out of the house, it wouldn't be as big of a deal as it is if it's found on the sheath. What my brain is getting at here is that they knew who they were looking for because someone told them who did it. They needed to find the proof to make it fit. Nine of Swords reversed, Wheel of Fortune, the World reversed. I believe how I said it, I They talked to Adam, got whatever that conversation was about. They traced it to the link past her and went to Brian. It's like they knew who they were looking for, but they had to find the evidence to make it fit the person. What this likely meant was that there was no immediate reason to prioritize Kohberger over other Elantra owners. On December 23rd, 3 weeks after his Elantra first made the list, Officer Payne applied for a search warrant for records of Kohberger's phone activity between November 12th and 14th. The results helped convince Payne that Kohberger was the Elantra owner he was looking for after all. So the Elantra makes the list, isn't prioritized. 3 weeks go by. The video, I'm gonna have to find that clip too. The video of Adam, I said the video of Adam was strategically timed. This is why. Nine of Wands reversed. Yeah, it's like they knew who they were looking for and we're trying, Ace of Pentacles reversed. We're trying to fill in the blanks. They didn't know right away. They find the video, what did you tell Adam, blah, 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 talk to Adam from that information, not directly, but somehow they trace that back to the link, figure out from the link, because now we know Elantra, now we know connection, now we just need to find who drives an Elantra that has a connection to this person. So we find that, then I request that person's phone records. Then I know who I was looking for, but now I have the proof that fits it. They're going to challenge this. We were doubting it in the beginning, but this is we knew who we were looking for, but doubted we could find the proof of it. Because the phone didn't ping, so it wasn't high priority, so we couldn't get a warrant after that. We had to find more proof in order to get a warrant to get the further proof. I really feel as though they knew who they were looking for before they, how do I put this? They knew that they were looking at Kohberger, but they didn't have enough. How do I make this make sense? It's not that there was proof and then, oh, it's Kohberger. It was, oh, it's Kohberger, but now we have to piece together the proof. I feel as though a very important piece of this is that I feel as though they knew that they were looking for Brian and had to find that evidence to make sure that they had all their ducks in a row in terms of how they acquired warrants for certain information. Because if we know we're looking for you, and your phone's not pinging so that you'd be high on the priority list, but we know we're looking for you, we have to find another way. Because the investigation has to make sense. That's why they're attacking or looking into how they requested everything from the lab and all of the people who were interacting with it and everything like that. They're really going to go into this DNA evidence. I believe that the defense, through Eight of Cups reversed, is going to try and get the entire case thrown out because of the use of genealogy to test the DNA. I don't know how, but I see that coming. Avoiding looking into him directly, but trying to find a way in from the outside. This is really just over and over saying to me, I feel like they knew who Kohberger was, but had to find the way to get the warrants to prove it, because they couldn't ask for warrants knowing how much this case would be looked into. They couldn't ask for the warrants for him until they had other proof that were leading them to be able to do so, if that makes sense. A novel forensic method stays hidden, the more room there is for errors in its application. Yeah, they're going to try to use the fact that it wasn't like, you don't trust it enough to write it in the report, but you based everything else that you got off of that information. So if it's not trustworthy, how can we trust it? What is going on? Why does he keep on the floor? There's a clip where I said, this is going to be a trial like you've never seen before. It's the introduction of this DNA type testing. Six of Wands, making something public. This is going to be a case like you've never seen before when it goes to court. He's going to pull some weird-ish. I don't know what it's going to be, but he's going to pull something out of a hat. That's why Brian's team is requesting and re-requesting certain pieces of discovery. They're trying to make it seem like the prosecution is hiding this particularly, but they're trying to establish a pattern of behavior. Look, they hide everything. They're hiding something from this too. The defense is going to try and get the entire case thrown out based off of the testing of forensic genealogy. And this is going to set a precedent for how this method is used going forward based off of how the public reacts to that portion of the trial. Okay, so PSYOP, which is used in the support of special operations, unconventional warfare, and counterinsurgency operations. I'm not saying that these murders are a PSYOP, but I feel like what has come since then has been an opportunity to test the public's reaction about certain things. And I think that genetic testing is getting its day in the sun to see how the public reacts to certain elements of that within the context of this highly publicized trial. That'll make more sense as the trial unfolds, I believe, but it is going to play a major role in this trial, and whatever happens in this trial is going to play a major role in every trial going forward that could potentially use this method of testing. So the murders, I don't believe are a PSYOP. I believe it's real. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that it's like the opportunity to test certain things because of how this trial has unfolded so far. Allegedly, my opinion. I almost feel like that video was strategically released at that specific time. And I believe that it's because they got some kind of information, traced that information back to the link, skipped over that, and just traced it all the way around to Brian. So like, drawing it. Hold on. Adam, link. It's a really bad drawing. Brian. Adam. They got something from Adam, traced that information,
got to like the link's role in it, but didn't do anything, went around the link and just got to who actually committed the crime. Especially with the Hierophant in reverse, it's like an unconventional way of doing something, and it's like they traced back in order to find the suspect. They went through the link, but like left her alone. It's like that's how they found who did it. But like they like discovered this trail that led to this person, and then that person led to the person they had proof that did it, but they ignored that person was a role in it.